Okay, so we should start now. Yeah, good morning, everyone who have joined right now, and a very warm welcome to all of you on the behalf of Litmania Literature. You are all aware that we are going to organize a lecture series, and this lecture is actually on Victorian poetry. And tomorrow there is a lecture by the PhD scholar from EFLU, Shahrukh Rahman. He is going to deliver a lecture on the preparation of NET. So, what should be the strategy, how you are going to prepare for UGC NET, and then he will take further lectures talking about UGC NET because I think he knows it really well because he has qualified GRF. So, you will be able to hear him from tomorrow onwards. So right now we have Krishna Kumar with us. He is also a PhD scholar and he has published his papers in the UGC Care List journals and his areas are means expertise areas are the Indian drama, especially the women depicted in the Indian drama. So he is working on that. So on that note, I would like to call Krishna. Are you there, Krishna?
Yes, Saruk, I'm
Fine,
there.
fine,
I'm
fine,
there.
fine.
Yeah.
So,
May I start?
Krishna, I would like to hand over the panel to you. Now, session is all yours.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Very good morning to all of you, my dear friends. So, Saruk, please present the first, the title slide.
Fine, fine,
So,
fine.
today, yeah. So,
Yeah, the screen
all
is
right.
visible, I
So,
guess.
yes, 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 yes.
Fine, fine.
Make it full screen. Yeah, please make it full screen. Okay. Yes. So, my dear friends, today we will talk about Victorian poetry, and under this title, I will talk about five subtitles under this Victorian poetry. I have made five subtitles, and which first I will talk about Victorian age, and then its social background, then its literary background. Yes, please next slide, Sarul.
Can
Sarul,
you
are
can
you
you see
there?
the next slide?
Hello. Yes, thank you. All right, so Victorian age started with the accession of Queen Victoria, 1837, and sometimes with the passage of the first Reform Bill which came into 1832, and it extends to the death of Queen Victoria till 1901. Okay, and the writings of this age, whether we can say in verse or in phrase, it reflected current social, economical, and intellectual problems of the present society. For example, we can say industrial revolution took place, and the effects of the same on economic and social structure were very high. The rapid urbanization was happening, growing class tensions, massive poverty was taking place, and impact on philosophy and religious fundamentalism of the theory of evolution. Okay, and it was an age of immense and variegated and often self-critical literary activity. It was the greatest age of English fiction. You see, actually, it was the greatest age of English fiction. Although some poets were there who was of very high reputation, his poetry really remarked a wonderful impact on our society and its people. Okay, so in briefly, I'll say the most eminent poets were Tennyson, Browning, Arnold. He was also a prose writer. Then Rashidi was there, Swinburne was there, and the most prominent, distinguished of many excellent novelists were Dickens was there, Bronte sisters were there, George Eliot was there, Thackeray was there, Meredith, Hardy, the great pessimist. How can we forget him? The most important essayists and critics were, Carlyle, Ruskin, Stevenson, and Arnold and Pater. Okay. Okay, so who will tell me the Bronte sisters? Who were the Bronte sisters? The name of the Bronte sisters? Anyone quickly?
Emily Bronte, Charlotte Bronte, and I think Jane.
No, not Jane.
Anne
Any?
Bronte, Anna
Yes,
Bronte.
Charlotte
yes, right,
Bronte,
right. Anne
Charlotte
Bronte.
Bronte. Anne Bronte.
Yes, 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 yes. Charlotte and Emily and Anne. Okay, three sisters: Charlotte Bronte, Emily Bronte, and Anne Bronte. Okay. All right, so let us come to the social background. In the social background, we can say what were the major events. Major events were like rise of technology and innovation was there. Industrial revolution was taking place. The Great Exhibition of London was there in 1851. The Indian Rebellion of 1857. The Great Irish Famine 1846 to 1852. Then the Chartist movement was there, the Great Reform Act was there, the Boers War 1880 to 1881 and 1899 to 1902. And then Crimean War. All of these were the major events that took place in that age. So, if you want me to talk about it, I'll talk about in the end because if we come to all this very detail, I think Victorian poetry will not be completed. Okay. Yeah. And also, it is also called the era of peace and prosperity, right? And the people attributed all the prosperity to their glorious and dominant Queen Victoria. The people were very much in favor of Queen Victoria. Okay, it is considered as the era of prosperity, aggressive nationalism, and rising imperialism. Emphasis was on faith in one's religion, queen, and those authority and continuous progress. When I say emphasis was in faith, all right, still, in one's religion, there was faith in religion, although people were questioning things. Okay. And then the very next topic is the spirit of questioning. Science, with its emphasis on reason rather than faith, encouraged the spirit of questioning. Man's faith in orthodox religion was shaken. People were no longer very much there into religion kind of thing, and he started questioning even God's mercy, for such orthodox notions of God were contradicted by facts. People started believing in facts. Okay, obviously Victorian compromise very much there, and doubts and unrest possessed man's soul, and everything was in turmoil. Okay, the three chief disintegrated forces of this age were the first, the industrial revolution, I said already, resulting in the rise of new, rich, and prosperous merchant class, desirous of rank and privilege. And second, the rise of democracy also took place. Women got chance to vote, and the rise of evolutionary science was also there, like Darwin's, origin of a species, right? And then society was changing rapidly. The industrial revolution gradually destroyed old agricultural England. Like agricultural society shifted to the from agricultural England to industrial England. People gave their land to the build to the building of factories and all. And the new merchant class quite naturally clamored for power and prestige, both political and social, and did not agree with the accepted order of things. Morality and respectability were the cornerstone of Victorianism. Okay, it is reflected in the humanitarianism of Dickens, Kingsley, and C. Reid. Rise of democracy took place. Women were given political rights, and more of them came out of their homes and take up independent careers. Problems of sex and married life were receiving increasing attention from thinkers and writers. All right. So, any question in the social background, or should I move forward?
No, sir.
All
It's
right.
clear. It's
Great.
clear.
Okay. Great. 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 So let us come to the literary background. Okay, what was the literary features of of the Victorian literature, or we can say writings of Victorian age. Okay, like it was insistence on morality, propriety, revolt against the grossness of the earlier age, respect for convention, like for example Tennyson and Dickens were there under this era. Revolt against convention, conservation, about which Carlyle, Arnold, Thackeray and Browning talked already. The revolt strengthened with the age. In the period of life there is no morality except the author's regard for his art. Okay, the literary features were also there. The spirit of skepticism is found in Tennyson's In Memoriam and Idylls of the King in Arnold. Meditative poetry and Carlyle's work. Obviously, Arnold's poetry was very much, spiritual in, in nature. The new religious and ethical thought emerged in the Oxford movement, very important movement of this age, and Cardinal Newman, which reflected widespread discontent with the Church of England. Also, many writers came under international influences. For example, American British writers' interaction like Carlyle and Transcendentalists Henry James. Then German influences, Carlyle and Arnold, and Italian influence, Browning, Swinburne, Morris, Meredith, etc. Okay, so, when we talk about literary background, literature and social criticism was there as a whole. The literature of the period is critical of the age. As I said, people were talking about the change that was happening in the society through their work. Okay, rather than respective of age, the popular philosophy of the time was utilitarianism. Very important. You can say very important movement. Utilitarianism. People were very much in faith that whatever we will do, that should be our complete utility. Okay, of our complete utility. Then complacency and optimism are the keynotes of the Victorian age in everything, but its literature, like mental struggle and spiritual dissatisfaction, are the keynote of its literature. Then science and religion, if we talk about science and religion, the Watt and Kelly, he's a critic, he said the critical method of the natural science was extended to history, and the theology and the fabric of authority found itself undermined on every side. Okay? Like rationalistic theories eliminated the supernatural form, the universe, and perhaps unintentionally gave some support to the materialism of the age. As I already said, people started questioning things. They started believing in facts. Now, let us come to the Oxford movement. It was a movement of religious reform, and one of its aim was uh, to rehabilitate the dignity of the church. And John Cable, professor of poetry at Oxford, was the real founder of this movement. There were two phases of this movement, which Cable heralded. At first, there was the high church revival in the bosom of Anglicanism, distinct from and independent of Roman Catholicism, but approaching it in its ceremonial, its dogmatism, and its attachment to the past. It was also inspired by E.B. Pusey. Newman was the chief protagonist of the movement. I dreamt of a free and powerful church and aspired to return to the spirit of the Middle Age. Also, there was lack of high literary ideals. The new reading public had asked for something to read, and two great industries grew up to satisfy the demand through popular fiction and popular journalism. So here I'll conclude the literary background. Any question? Any question in this literary
No, sir.
background? Okay, good.
No, sir.
Okay, okay, good, good, good. Now let us come to the characteristics of Victorian poetry. Right? The poetry of the Victorian era was continuation of Romanticism. It was not, very much different from Romanticism, although there was some, there was some difference. Okay, it has beauty and variety enough, but is less inspiring than the poetry of the preceding age. The preceding age, the Romanticism. Some characteristics of the poetry of this age are, the poetry of Victorian era relied on the classical and traditional forms of ideas. People were using archaic form, and archaic form was especially used by Tennyson. Then use of local colloquial speech and dialect was there, especially in Prague. Then experimented the poetry of this age. The poets of this age experimented with the language using earlier forms of versification. Then melancholia and concern with the past was there. It was often philosophical and reflective, as in Arnold. Then use of classical allusion were there, and anxiety over religion, science, and tradition was there. Then classicism, medievalism, and aestheticism influenced several poets of this Victorian era. High symbolism and aestheticism in the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood was there. Then translation of poetry from other linguistics and literary traditions took place. And use of experimental verse forms like the dramatic monologue. Dramatic monologue is very important. If we talk about Tennyson, most of his poems deal with dramatic monologue. What is dramatic monologue? Anyone? Dramatic monologue? Anyone who will
So
define?
it is a single way interactive process in which the protagonist or the narrator or any element, any character of a play only speaks and the listener only listens.
Yes, right, right, right. Whatever, like for example, whatever thoughts are going on in your mind, you have written it on paper, and people are just listening. There is no second person to listen to you. Okay. Then memory and the past figures prominently are there in the Victorian poetry. Melancholia and concern with the past is obviously there. Many poets wrote of social critique.
Sir, in a dramatic monologue, I think listener may be one or more than one.
Voice is not clear. Come again.
Sir, I have a doubt in dramatic monologue. In dramatic monologue, one speaker and the listener may be one or more than one. Is it right? Hello, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Hello. Hello. Am I audible?
Hello?
Yeah, am I audible? Yes. So, yes. Did you understand? What did I say? Did you listen? See, in dramatic monologue, Subhashita, your boy, I think sound is coming from your side.
Sir, yes, sir. I think
Subhashita,
network issue.
yeah,
So
see,
my network is very poor.
please, okay, please switch off your
Hello?
mic and then just listen to me. Okay. Ah, yes, just
Okay, okay.
switch off the mic. Yes, yes, yes. Now listen to me, and then you can come again. See, in dramatic monologue, whatever thoughts are going on in your mind, people written on it. Okay, and after that, we became the reader. There was no listener. Okay, there is a big difference in reader and listener. Now we are the leader, and people, the poet who has written dramatic monologue, people were not listening to them. He has just written it, whatever was going on in his mind. Okay, so there can be more readers. We are the readers only. In dramatic monologue means the communication from one side. There will be no other people. Did you understand? Now you can open your mic and say. Subhashmita.
Okay, sir, I understand that previously I read a poem which was written by Robert Browning, My Last Churches. So it was a great example of dramatic monologue in which there one speaker and one listener. So my doubt is listener may be one or more than one, and you say that there is no listener.
See,
So I do not understand.
I think
Wait,
no, no.
wait.
See, he is talking to himself. Okay, he is talking to himself. Browning is
Okay.
in my last touches. He is talking to himself only.
Just a
Yes.
minute, just a minute, just a minute. Sorry for the interruption. See, Subhasmita, can you please turn off your mic? Can you
Okay,
please
okay,
turn?
okay.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Okay, so the thing you are saying is that there will be a listener. So, see, in the dramatic monologue, what actually happens is that though there is a speaker, there is one speaker. Obviously, there is a speaker, but then the listener is actually not present. But we can assume that yes, there is a listener. Okay, that depends upon our assumption that okay in that last duchess when that duke is saying we are means we can suppose that there is a listener who has come from the a kind of he's a kind of messenger which has been sent by the next duke for the marriage proposal. Okay, so that is a kind of assumable, we can assume, but in general we cannot say that there is a listener, but his role is assumable. We can assume that there is a silent listener and he is sometimes even asking some questions which we have to guess. Okay, which we have to guess that okay, he has asked that is the reason why Duke is replying to him. Are you getting my point?
Yes, yes, thank you so much.
Fine, 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 fine. Okay,
Now I
okay.
don't have any doubt.
Yeah, fine. Krishna, you can continue.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much,
Uh,
Farooq, for helping me. Yes.
uh,
Now,
excuse
let
me.
us come to the last.
Okay, dear
Yes, yes.
Krishna Kumar, if you allow me, I would like to explain the term very briefly for the convenience of the students.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
See, okay, thank you. See, dear students, most of the time, what happens, the term itself, the words, the name of the term explains itself, like dramatic monologue. Pay attention to there are two words, dramatic and monologue. So, dramatic is like something that begins abruptly in the middle of action. So, take the example of Last Ride Together by Robert Browning. So, there is the breakup between a lover and his beloved, and the lover is addressing his beloved. Okay, now if we have now break up, then this and the in the middle of action, this kind of thing. And monologue is the opposite of dialogue. So we all understand what is dialogue. Dialogue is between two persons. There is a speaker and audience. So both will speak. But monologue is only very much like one person speaks, and the number of audience or listener has nothing to do with dramatic monologue. Yeah, of course there may be audience, there may be listeners, or may not be, assume, but the point is they will always be silent, they will never speak. That's the thing.
Fine. Thank you, Shahrukh. Yeah,
Yes,
Krishna, you can
thank
continue.
you. Yes, thank you, Sarif. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's what I said. Monologue. Monologue means only one. Okay. Okay, now the last point of the Victorian poetry is crisis of faith in most of the major poet is seen in the poetry of the major poet. So on this note, I'll come to the end of the Victoria characteristics of Victorian poetry. Any question on the characteristics of Victorian poetry? No, should I
Hello,
come to
hello,
the
sir.
yes, yes.
Sir, the concept of crisis of faith is not cleared yet.
Crisis of faith in most of the major. See, actually, people, I said already, people started questioning, the religious kind of thing. They started believing faith. Okay, so that's what people like the term I have given crisis is like faith was very much there. Okay, people started questioning faith. Okay, like why should I believe in God? Why not fact? Clear?
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah. So
Sir,
let
I
us
have a
come.
question.
Yes, yes, yes.
Sir, we assume the art for art's sake in Victorian poetry?
Art for art's sake. See, R.K. Narayan is the greatest hero of this, of this poet, of this term, art for art's sake. And we can say, yes, art for art's sake is there in Victorian poetry as well. Yes.
I would like to add a point here. um,
Yes, yes.
See, art for art's sake and art for life's sake, both these two
Both are,
concepts were
yeah,
there in the
yes.
Victorian era period. Art for art's sake, basically, it was advanced by Walter Horatio Pater. He was the biggest pioneer of this concept in the Victorian age. So, art for art's sake, he basically says that art should be for its own sake. It should not teach anyone. No moral
Yeah,
listening, only for pleasure's sake. So, if you
yes,
remember the
yes.
pre-Raphaelites poets, so they were writing in that kind of. They were following that trend. And there is Matthew Arnold, who is like concerned with morality, culture, civilization, all those things. So his concept is life, art for life's sake. So not only pleasing, but art should teach us, give us something,
Yes,
moral
yes,
lessons
yes.
or human lesson. And to add one more point, there is this D.H. Lawrence, modern novelist. He says art for my sake. So his opinion is I write for my own sake, for nobody's sake. Thank you.
Yes, yes, right. Okay, so let us come to the Tennyson, Lord Alfred Tennyson, the greatest hero of the Victorian poetry, right? So, he was a representative poet, and that's why I said the greatest hero of the Victorian poetry. He was also an artist, he was a poet of nature, he was a thinker, and a poet of law and order, as well as of progress. As a nature poet, he has less power of dealing with the man and woman or with the passions. He deals with types of rather than with individuals. Okay, his attitude is one of compromises between science and religion. His works itself, his work itself is typical of the immense complexity of his age and historically interesting as reflecting the social and political trends of its age, which is characterized by first is a minute of observation of nature. Second is an exquisite precision in the use of words and phrases. And the third one is the picturesqueness and aptness of similes and his use of repetitions and assonance, and then subtle melody of his diction. If we talk about his works, his works, for example, Timbuktu is the very important work, and the questions even in net come from Timbuktu. I think past back to back, no, back to back to back. Last 3 years had a question from Timbuktu. The Timbuktu is about a legendary city in Africa. It is an optimistic poem showing the modern expectations that the human race, guided by reason and science, it would come together and build a better world for everyone. It also won the Chancellor's Gold Medal at Cambridge. Okay. Also, we can say, yes, yes. Saruk, please present the screen. Is it there? Yes. Uh, in memoriam, again, very important poem. In memoriam, or we can say the way of the soul. The title also belongs to this title. In memoriam, right? It denotes an epitaph or obituary. It was a group of 132 elegies written over a period of 17 years, written in memory of Arthur Henry Ham. Search for hope after great loss. Victorian theme. It was written in iambic tetrameter patterns, and the rhyme scheme of this poetry was ABBA. Also, it is called In Memoriam Stanza. It is about the poet's anxieties about the change, evolution, and immortality. And there was next some poems, and chiefly lyrical poems, which was written in 1830. The Caracan Irregular, it is an irregular sonnet about a massive legendary creature from Icelandic saga that dwells at the bottom of the sea. Then Ode to Memory, picture-shake description of landscape, as in later poetry. Mariana is there. Mariana is about a woman waiting for her lover's return, based on the character Mariana in Measure for Measure. Brilliant use of objects and landscape to convey a state of strong emotion is there in this poetry. Then, if we talk about poetic drama, in 1875, Tennyson published. Yes, yes. In 1875, Tennyson published his first play, Queen Mary. It was a group of dramatic works followed, including Harold, 1876. It is some important poems is there. Beckett in 1884 and The Cup 1881, which were not great successes. Prose play, The Promise of May, only prose work shows growing despondency and resentment at the religious, moral, and political tendency of the age. And if we talk about Tennyson's image and influence, it is an embodiment of his age. It inspired the period of lights. Queen Victoria considered him the perfect poet of love and loss. Then T.S. Eliot called him the poet of metric and melancholia, poet laureate and official poetic spokesman for the reign of Victoria. And if we talk about Tennyson's style, his early poems like lyric and legendary narrative, and the later poems are ethical interest. He took great care and skill in perfecting the form and technique. And then the mixed sound and sense, great musical quality is there in his poet. And if we say Keats's descriptive power, just like he has the power of describing like a Keats, like ornate description, pictorial effect, sumptuous imagery created a lovely image by carefully unmasking detail. Sarah, please come to the next slide. Okay, so any question in the technician? I think I'll end it here with the technician. Obviously, you
Sir,
can read his, yes.
sir, pardon me if I am wrong. His name is Alfred Lord Tennyson, na?
Yes. Alfred Lord Tennyson. Why? What happened? Did I write something wrong in the
Lord
PPT?
Alfred Tennyson. I have seen this on slide.
Yeah, Lord Alfred Tennyson.
Okay,
So,
sir.
yes. Let us come to the Browning. If there is no question, you can read his other poems like The Charge of the Light Brigade, Maud, Edlish of the King. Then Locksley Hall is there, Tithonus is there. So the Lady of Shalott is there. You can read all these, all these poems. And like his thematic poetry is also there, like Porphyrius Lover, John's Agricola, My Last Touches, Soliloquy of the Spanish Question, The Pied Piper of Hamelin, How They Brought the God, News from Get to X, Home Thoughts from Abroad, The Bishop Orders His Tomb in St. Patrick's Church, The Flight of the Duchess. All these poems are very important. You can read it by yourself. Okay. Should I come to the Browning? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, please
Okay.
continue.
Okay. Good.
Continue. Let us continue.
Hmm.
Yeah, hello.
Please switch off your mic. Yeah.
Krishna, can you hear me? Yeah, you do not need to ask every time. You can continue. Whenever we will not
Oh.
hear you, we will let you know. Okay? And the
Okay.
questions
All right.
will be
All
asked at the end of the session. Otherwise, the session will extend too long, and you have
right. Yeah.
still
We have
many more
only
slides.
15 minutes, I guess. Yes.
Exactly, you
All
have
right. All
another
right. All right.
session to attend. So please go on.
Yes. Sure. Okay. Thank you. So, Robert Branding, obviously, he is a great master of art of representing the inner side of human beings. That's why okay. So their mental and moral qualities is there. He frequently expresses his views on human life. He is an optimistic to the core. His poetry is dramatic because he deals with the character and conduct of men and women in a completely living form, and philosophical because he also analyzes the motives and spiritual consequences of human actions. Then his Paracelsus. It is a story of a 16th century alchemist, monodrama. It is a monodrama. It showcases Browning's predominant ideas: life without love, a failure, God's will, more than human conjecture. It is behind everything. The next one is Sordello. It is a long poem in heroic couplets. The relationship between art and life is shown in this poem. The style is very obscure, which led to the hostile reception. Then dramatic poetries are like Bells and Pomegranates, a series of Browning's work written in 1841 to 1846. It included Pippa Pashe, which is written in 1841, then dramatic lyrics, 1842, dramatic romances and lyrics, 1845, and some plays, some major poems like we can say My Last Touches and Forest Areas Lover, The Flight of the Duchess, etc. Browning's style is very obscure and sometimes rugged, angular style, variety of metrical poem forms, cleverly manipulated rhythmic effects at its best. Novel dignity and verbal music is there. For example, you can say Splando, Fancies, and Facts. Then the Ring and the Book. Then Fra Lipolipi. It is in the syllabus of the DU. The Fra Lipolipi. Shawl and Cleon, then Pauline, and Love Among the Ruins, and Last Night Together, the Lost Reader. See, I can't talk in detail about Browning Crosby's poetry. These are very important poetry. You can read it by your own because many poets are still left to discuss. Next point, next slide, Saruk. Yes, Matthew Arnold. He is also a prose writer, but his some of his poetry was very important. So he is regarded as the greatest elegiac poet of England. His elegies are an expression of his inherent pessimism and sense of loneliness. As his legitimate fame is as a prose writer and critic, his poems are not of high quality. His poems include the theme of alienation, spiritual emptiness, despair, and stoicism. His poetic career began in 1849, and some of his major works are poetic drama, which are Empedocles on Etna and other poems, which is written in 1867. Then Merope, 1858, a classical tragedy. Then poems. The titles of the work is poems, which is written in 1852 and 1853. And poems, second series, 1855. And some of his lyrics are Margaret poems, then Forsaken Merman, Dover Beach, Scholar Gypsy, and Philomela. Then some of his elegies are Thyrsis, Scholar Gypsy, Memorial Verse, and his narrative poems are Tristram and Iseult and Shohrab and Rustam. In Dover Beach, this is the very these 4 poems are very important as questions come in the net from these poems. In Dover Beach, the poet in this poem, the poet tells his beloved that they should be honest with each other, for the world that they live in, which looks so beautiful and new and lay before them like a land of dreams, doesn't have joy, love, or spiritual life or certainty or peace or help in times of trouble. The next one is Thyrsis. Thyrsis is a pastoral elegy to commemorate the death of Arnold's friend and poet Arthur Howe in 1861. Then Clog is presented as Thyrsis and Arnold as a Corydon. The next poem is The Scholar Gypsy. It is also again a pastoral elegy based on a 17th century story found in Joseph Gallenville's The Vanity of Dogmatizing, companion poem of Thyrsis. It is a companion poem of Thyrsis. The next one is Empedocles on Etna, a dramatic poem again published anonymously in 1852 in the collection of Empedocles on Itna and other poems, which is written in 1867. Next slide. I hope people are listening. Arthur Hugh Clarke. So Arthur Hugh Clarke was a lifelong friend and college companion of Arnold, and his death was the subject of Arnold's elegy, Thyrsis. G.D. Klingopoulos observed, Clarke's work is not by any means entirely somber. Much is humorous and frankly satirical. He is best known now for his short poems. We find same broodings, melancholy, spiritual unrest, and disturbing introspection as we find in Arnold. Some of his major works are Dipsychus, a good example of the Victorian conflict between two spiritual voices, science and religion. Then the Bothy of Taberna, Violik, 1848, long vacation pastoral on Oxford, set in the Scottish Highlands, written in hexameter, is a full of socialism, reading party humorous and Scottish imagery. And the next poet is James Thompson. He wrote under the pseudonym Bish Vanolish, which has been derived from the name of the poet Shelley and novelist. He struggled with insomnia, alcoholism, and chronic depression, which plagued his final decade. In him, we come across unrelieved pessimism, largely subjective. He was not altogether an unalloyed, melancholic loss to all sense of humor, fun, or humanitarianism. He definitely had more sides to his personality. Nancy. And his works are The City of Dreadful Night, which is an expression of bleak pessimism in a dehumanized, uncaring urban environment. Insomnia and Matter, Tenebrarum, well regarded and contains some striking passages, and it is autobiographical in nature. On to the next slide, sir. Yes, thank you. Edward Fitzgerald. He was a man of means and lived in the country like a gentleman hermit, passing his time in reading, etching, gardening, and cultivating friendship. Fitzgerald's pessimism is inherent in his acceptance of the evanescence of life and its purposelessness. Now, Fitzgerald sees life as a purposeless. He thinks that people can die anytime. That is why he should not worry about anything. He should just eat, drink, and be merry for it because human life is so short and may end at any moment. He was very pessimistic in nature. He is chiefly known for his verse translation of the Persian Rubaiyat of Umar Khayyam. Again, an important poem. The impact of the Rubaiyat on the Victorians was startling. It awakened them to the Oriental view of life, especially its fatalism, which is so foreign to the Western mind. Hedonism they knew, but it was never presented charmingly. He also translated eight dramas from the Spanish of Calderon and three from the Greek. Uh, Agamemnon of Aeschylus and Oedipus the King and Oedipus at Colonna of Sophocles. Then we come to the Lady Browning, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. She was regarded in her time as the greatest woman poet of England. She belongs to the Romantic tradition and is essentially lyrical. She is remarkable for her frank expression of passion and for moral courage in attacking social injustice. And her works are again sonnets from the Portuguese, which reflects the whole course of their love and courtship. And Copper's Grave, it's remarkable for its tender pity and Christian pity. Then Cry of Children, again very important poem. It is a strong protest against the employment of children in coal mines and factories. Next slide, Farooq. Yeah, let us come to the pre-Raphaelite movement. The pre-Raphaelite movement, poets are there. This movement was formed in 1848 by painter and poet, the painter poet, Diderot. He was also a poet and a painter. W.H. Hunt, 1827 to 1910, and John Milnes, 1829 to 1896. They were influenced by John Ruskin. It was a revolt against 18th century academism and the canons of the Royal Academy against realism. It was dedicated to recovering the purity of medieval art, which Raphael and the Renaissance had destroyed. It was an attempt to the truthfulness, simplicity, accuracy, and spirit of devotion of Italian painting before Raphael and Italian Renaissance. And the notable poets are D.G. Rossetti, William Morris, and A.C. Swinburne. So in pre-Raphaelite movements, other poets were also there. Okay. So if we talk about D.G. Rossetti, he was a poet, painter, and translator. He had great artistic depth. His poetry is richly colored. His verse is curiously and skillfully wrought, but his work is not entirely wholesome. Mainly, or you can say sincerely. His passion for beauty governed also his choice of words and phrases and made him lover of melody and music. His style is marked by an abundant use of symbols. His poetry, like his painting, was detailed, symbolic, concerned with the remote and sometimes erotic as well. It was often pseudo medieval, cast in ballad form and sometimes archaic in language. Then again, some of his works is Jenny, a dramatic monologue about a London prostitute, his best known poem, The Blessed Damozel, as well as early studies of Dante at Verona, then Bride's Prelude and Rosemary. In these poems, he reproduces that sensuous atmosphere which gives such richness of effect to Keats, The Eve of St. Agnes and Lamia, and his success there is unquestioned. Next slide, sir. Let us come to the H.T. Schönberg. Compton Wicked said, just as Georges Rossetti made thought pictorially sensuous, Schönberg has made thought musically sensuous. Right? He is not merely melody, as Shelley was gloriously melody. He is harmony. Shelley's music is the music of lute, but Schönberg's music is the music of full orchestra. His melodies are rich and complex with a sweeping grandeur that no other poet has equaled. Music and melody and pictorialism are the two leading qualities of his poetry. And some of his works are like Atlanta and Caledon, which was written in 1865, A Century of Roundels, 1883, Songs, hello? Yeah. Songs Before Sunrise, which was written in 1871, Poems and Ballads, the second series, Poems and Ballads, 1866. All these poems caused a sensation when it was first published, especially the poems which were written in homage of Sappho of Lesbos, such as Anactoria and Shepard. Then let us come to William Morris, 1834 1896. He was again a poet, novelist, translator, and English textile conference held to audible. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
If I'm audible. Okay, okay, good, good. Thank you. So William Morris, again, he was a poet, novelist, translator, socialist activist, and English textile designer. His literary contributions helped to establish the modern fantasy genre, while he played a significant role in propagating the early socialist movement in Britain. So some of his works are again the Haystack in the Floods, Masters in this Hall, of the Midlands, poems by the way, 1891, The Earthly Paradise, The Story of Siegfried, The Volsung and the Fall of the Midlands, The World of Romance, and A King's Lesson. So all these poems are very much important. Questions come in net examination from all these poems. You may read it in detail. Thank you. So any question now? So we came to the end of our session. I guess we have to like, or do you want me to discuss something more in Victorian poetry?
Yeah, so if you have any doubt, you can ask right now, or you can also post in the group. Okay, two things that we can do, and
Yes,
also
yes, yes, yes.
uh, I will try to make this video available on the YouTube channel of Litmania, so you can go there and watch this if someone has missed any important point from the video lecture. But then, if you want to ask any question, you can ask right now.
Sir, can we get this PPT from your Telegram group?
See, the problem is we do not share PPT right now. Earlier we used to share, but then it means you can take the screenshot while the presentation is going on, but there is no any such possibility of sharing the PPT because it took lot of time to make this. You can see that the PPT is well prepared. He has mentioned almost all the authors along with the names. So
Okay.
after doing so much of labor, no one want to share their PPT. You can take the screenshot, or you can also check.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Fine, fine.
And yes, sir. I take screenshot.
Great, great.
Thank you.